I heard the crystal wine glass clink against the china before I heard my grandfather's voice cut through the Christmas dinner chatter. "Maria, sweetheart," he said, his warm smile lighting up the formal dining room, "are you still living in that beautiful house I bought for you? The one in Portland?" Every fork stopped moving. Every conversation died mid-sentence. I froze, my hand halfway to my water glass, the word forming on my lips before my brain could catch up. What? Because I didn't live in Portland. I lived in a cramped studio apartment in Seattle, working 60-hour weeks at a marketing firm, eating instant ramen 3 nights a week because my student loans took half my paycheck. I had never owned a house. Ever. My grandfather's smile faltered slightly as he looked at me, confused. "The house," he repeated gently. "The one I put the down payment on 5 years ago. For your graduation gift." The room tilted. My mother's face had gone completely white. My father's jaw was clenched so tight I could see the muscle jumping beneath his skin. And that's when I knew something was very, very wrong. Let me back up, because you need to understand my family to understand how this moment destroyed everything I thought I knew. My name is Maria Castellano, and I grew up in the shadow of perfection, specifically, my older brother Jason's perfection. Jason was the golden child, Harvard MBA, engaged to a lawyer, already VP at a consulting firm in Boston at 29. Every family gathering was a celebration of Jason's latest achievement. I was the other one. The art major who wasted her intelligence. The daughter who chose marketing over medicine, creativity over corporate law. My parents never said I was a disappointment out loud, but I felt it in every tight smile, every comparison, every time they changed the subject when their friends asked about me. My grandfather, though Grandpa Vincent, he was different. A self-made billionaire who'd built his commercial real estate empire from nothing, he'd always told me that passion mattered more than prestige. When I'd chosen my major, he'd been the only one who said, "Follow your heart, sweetheart. Money means nothing if you hate your life." But even his support came with distance. He lived in San Francisco, busy with his empire and his second wife, Rita. We saw him maybe twice a year, Thanksgiving and Christmas, formal affairs at my parents' house in Sacramento. If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, if you've ever been the backup plan instead of the priority, drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. You'll understand why what happened next cut so deep. I thought my parents were just disappointed in me. I thought their coldness was about my choices. I had no idea they'd been stealing from me for 5 years. "Vincent," my mother said, her voice shaking slightly, "maybe we should discuss this later." "Discuss what?" Grandpa Vincent set down his fork, his sharp businessman's eyes moving between my parents and me. "Maria doesn't know about the house?" My father cleared his throat. "There was a miscommunication." "A miscommunication?" My grandfather's voice went cold in that way that made CEOs sweat during negotiations. "I transferred $250,000 5 years ago for Maria's down payment. I have the wire transfer confirmation. I spoke with you both about making sure it went to a property in her name. How is there a miscommunication?" $250,000. The number hung in the air like smoke from a gun. Jason shifted uncomfortably at the far end of the table. His fiancée, Claire, studied her plate intently. Rita, my step-grandmother, had stopped eating entirely, watching my mother with an expression I couldn't read. "Dad," my mother started, using that pleading tone she usually reserved for asking Grandpa Vincent for charity donations, "it's complicated." "Where's the house?" I asked. My voice sounded strange, distant. If you received money for a house in my name, where is it? The silence that followed was so complete I could hear the antique clock ticking in the hallway. My father straightened his shoulders, slipping into what I called his lawyer mode. He wasn't a lawyer, but he was a financial advisor, and he used that same calm, authoritative tone when he wanted to shut down questions. The money was used for a property investment, he said carefully. A sound investment that benefited the family. What family? I asked, my heart pounding. What property? My mother's hand flew to her pearl necklace, that nervous tell she'd had since I was a child. Jason's condo, she whispered. In Boston. We used it as part of his down payment. The room erupted. Grandpa Vincent stood up so fast his chair scraped against the hardwood floor. You used Maria's graduation gift to buy Jason a condo? It was an investment, my father insisted, his calm cracking. Jason was just starting his career, and the Boston market was perfect for. It was theft, my grandfather roared, and I'd never heard him raise his voice in my entire life. That money was designated for Maria. I made that explicitly clear. I have the paperwork. We were going to pay her back, my mother said desperately. Jason was going to refinance in a few years, and Maria was struggling with her career choice anyway, so we thought. You thought she'd never amount to anything, Rita interrupted quietly, speaking for the first time. So you gave her inheritance to the son you actually valued. The words landed like a physical blow. I couldn't breathe. 5 years. 5 years I'd been working myself to exhaustion, living in that cramped studio with the broken heating and the upstairs neighbors who screamed at 2 a.m. 5 years of skipping meals to make rent, of taking freelance work on weekends, of watching my friends buy homes while I calculated how long it would take to save for even a down payment. 5 years of my parents asking me to loan them money for emergencies that I somehow always managed to scrape together, even when I had nothing. And all that time, they'd had $250,000 that was supposed to be mine. Jason hadn't looked up from his plate once. Not once. Did you know? I asked him directly. He finally met my eyes. Maria. Did you? No. His silence was answer enough. If you've ever discovered that the people who were supposed to protect you were the ones betraying you all along, hit that like button. Because this was only the beginning of what I uncovered. I left that dinner table. Just walked out into the cold December night without my coat, got in my car, and drove back to my apartment in Seattle through a blur of tears and rage. By the time I got home at 2 a.m., I had 17 missed calls from my mother and 4 text messages from Jason that all said some variation of "let's talk about this rationally." Rationally. As if there was a rational explanation for stealing from your own daughter. But here's what they didn't know about me. I might have been the disappointing child, but I was good at my job. I was a digital marketing specialist, which meant I knew how to research, how to track data, how to find information that people thought was buried. I spent that entire night and the next day digging. First, I called my grandfather and asked for copies of every document related to the money he'd given my parents. He had them sent to me within hours, wire transfer confirmations, emails with my mother explicitly stating the money was for Maria's future home, even a signed letter from both my parents acknowledging the gift was designated for me. Then I started searching public records. Property records, specifically. Within 2 hours, I found Jason's condo in Boston, a gorgeous 2-bedroom in Back Bay, purchased 5 years ago for $1.2 million. The down payment listed on the mortgage documents? $300,000. My $250,000 plus another $50,000 my parents must have added to make Jason's offer competitive. But it got worse. So much worse. I found another property, a vacation rental in Lake Tahoe, purchased 3 years ago. Listed owner, a family trust in my parents' names. Purchase price, $780,000. I found refinancing documents for my parents' own house in Sacramento, taking out equity during the same period, then records of that equity being used for property investments. They'd built a real estate portfolio, using my money as seed capital. And during those same 5 years, they'd asked me for loans. Small amounts, $500 here, $1,200 there, always with stories about unexpected expenses or tight months. I'd given them nearly $8,000 total over 5 years, money I didn't have, because I thought my parents were struggling. They weren't struggling. They were building wealth. Off my back. 3 days after Christmas, I got an unexpected call. Claire, Jason's fiancée. We need to talk, she said without preamble. Can I come to Seattle? She arrived the next evening, looking uncomfortable in designer jeans and a cashmere sweater that probably cost more than my monthly rent. We sat in my tiny studio, her perched awkwardly on my second-hand couch, surrounded by the evidence of the life I'd been living while my brother enjoyed luxury I'd paid for. I didn't know, she started. Not until the dinner. Jason told me his parents had helped with the down payment, but I thought he meant from their own money. I didn't know about you. But you know something, I said. Or you wouldn't be here. Claire twisted her engagement ring, a massive diamond that caught the light. There's more, she said quietly. Jason's been worried lately. He mentioned something about your parents pushing him to pay back your grandfather before you filed any legal claims. They've been liquidating assets. My heart started pounding. What assets? The Tahoe property. They sold it last month, took a loss to close quickly. They're trying to get liquid cash together. She met my eyes. Maria, I think they're scared. Your grandfather's lawyers have been sending letters. I hadn't known that. Grandpa Vincent and I had talked several times since Christmas, but he'd only mentioned that his legal team was reviewing options. I didn't realize he'd already started applying pressure. There's something else, Claire continued. Your parents have been telling people, family friends, your extended relatives, that you're trying to extort money from them. That you're making false claims about a gift that was always meant for family use, and that you're being greedy. The betrayal somehow managed to cut deeper. They were stealing from me and destroying my reputation. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Claire looked genuinely pained. Because it's not right. I love Jason, but this isn't the family I thought I was marrying into. And you deserve to know what you're up against. She paused. And because I saw your face at that dinner. I have a younger sister, and if my parents did to her what yours did to you. She didn't finish the sentence. After she left, I sat in the dark for a long time, thinking. My parents had stolen from me, given my inheritance to Jason, built wealth while I struggled, and now they were trying to paint me as the villain for wanting what was rightfully mine. If you've ever been gaslit by the people who hurt you, told that your justified anger made you the bad guy, comment below. I need you to understand, what I did next wasn't revenge. It was justice. I didn't want to destroy my parents. I want to be clear about that. Despite everything, some small part of me still loved them, still remembered birthday parties and bedtime stories and moments when I'd felt cherished. But I also couldn't let this stand. Not just for me, but for every version of me that had existed over those 5 years, the Maria who'd cried over her bank account, who'd worked herself sick, who'd given her last dollars to parents who were secretly wealthy. So I built a case the way you'd build a house, foundation first. I hired a lawyer, not some big corporate firm, but a sharp woman named Diana Reeves who specialized in family financial disputes and had a reputation for being absolutely ruthless when her clients had been wronged. "This is clear-cut," Diana said after reviewing my documents. "The money was designated specifically for you, acknowledged in writing, and used for someone else's benefit without your knowledge or consent. That's conversion, possibly fraud. We can pursue this civilly, and we'll win." But winning in court meant months of litigation, public records, and my family's finances being exposed. It meant burned bridges and permanent fractures. What if, I asked slowly, there was another way? Diana leaned back in her chair, studying me. "I'm listening. Here's what most people don't understand about justice. It doesn't have to happen in a courtroom. Sometimes the most powerful recourse is the truth, delivered in the right way, to the right people. I didn't want money, or rather, I didn't just want money. I wanted accountability. I wanted my parents to face what they'd done, not just to me, but to their own moral center. So Diana and I crafted something more elegant than a lawsuit, a formal demand letter, backed by irrefutable evidence, with a 30-day response deadline and consequences for refusal that went beyond money. The letter outlined everything: the designated gift, the misappropriation, the pattern of asking me for loans while building wealth, the sale of the Tahoe property, the current defamation campaign. It demanded full restitution, my $250,000 plus interest and the $8,000 in loans, within 30 days. But here's the key clause Diana added, the one that made this about more than money: if my parents refused to pay, we wouldn't just file a civil suit. We would file formal complaints with my father's professional licensing board for financial advisors, detailing how he'd misappropriated designated funds and misrepresented family financial situations. We'd also send copies of all documentation to every member of our extended family and family friend who'd been told I was extorting my parents. The truth, delivered to everyone they'd lied to. "This gives them a choice," Diana explained. "Pay what they owe and apologize quietly, or face professional consequences and public exposure. Most people choose door number 1. We sent the letter on January 15th, certified mail with signature confirmation. 3 days later, my phone started ringing. My mother called first, hysterical. "How could you do this to us? We're your parents." I didn't yell. I'd learned that yelling gave them ammunition to paint me as emotional and irrational. Instead, I spoke calmly. "You stole from me for 5 years. The letter outlines exactly what I'm asking for, what was always mine. You have 30 days to respond." "We don't have that kind of money anymore," she sobbed. "We sold the Tahoe place at a loss, and with Jason's wedding coming up." "That's not my problem," I said, and the words felt like freedom. "You had 5 years to make this right. You chose to spend that time building wealth and asking me for loans instead." She hung up on me. My father called an hour later, using his calm financial advisor voice. "Maria, let's be reasonable. We can work out a payment plan." "The letter outlines payment terms," I interrupted. "Talk to your lawyer. You're going to destroy this family over money?" The disappointment in his voice was the same tone he'd used my entire life when I didn't meet his expectations. "No, Dad," I said quietly. "You already destroyed it. I'm just asking for what's mine." Jason called next, which surprised me. Maria, please. Claire told me she came to see you. This is getting out of hand. Can't we just... Just what? I asked. Forget that you've been living in a condo I paid for while I worked myself to exhaustion? Forget that Mom and Dad stole from me and you said nothing? I didn't know at first, he said, and for the first time, he sounded genuinely upset. By the time I found out, the money was already spent on the down payment. What was I supposed to do? Tell me, I said simply. Any time in the last 5 years, Jason, you could have told me. The silence on the line stretched out. I thought they'd make it right eventually, he finally said. I thought. You thought it was easier to let me struggle than to rock the boat, I finished. That's always been our family, hasn't it? Keep Maria in the dark, keep the peace, let her handle it. He didn't deny it. Subscribe if you want to see how people react when they can't manipulate you anymore. Because that's when things got interesting. 2 weeks into the 30-day deadline, my grandfather called. They want a family meeting, he said, his voice heavy. Your parents, Jason, myself, and you. Neutral location. They say they want to resolve this as a family. Every instinct screamed trap. But Diana thought it might actually work in our favor. If they make admissions in front of witnesses, even better for us. I'll come with you. We met at a conference room in a hotel in San Francisco, neutral territory, with my grandfather, Rita, Diana, and me on one side of the table, my parents, Jason, Claire, and their lawyer on the other. My mother looked like she'd aged 5 years, her makeup not quite hiding the circles under her eyes. My father's confident demeanor had cracks in it. Jason couldn't look at me directly. Their lawyer, a smooth man in an expensive suit, started with pleasantries and then moved into negotiation mode. We're here to find a reasonable compromise. There's no compromise, Diana interrupted coolly. Your client's misappropriated funds designated for our client. We have documentation. The demand is straightforward, full restitution plus interest and expenses, or we proceed with litigation and professional complaints. The money was used for family benefit, their lawyer argued. Mrs. and Mr. Castellano viewed all their children's success as collective. Then why, I asked quietly, and everyone turned to look at me, did you ask me for loans? Why didn't you tell me about the house? Why did Jason get the benefit while I got the struggle? My mother's composure cracked. You were always so independent, Maria. You never seemed to need us the way Jason did. Because you made sure I couldn't need you, I said, my voice steady even as my hands shook under the table. You made sure I knew I was a disappointment, that my choices were wrong, that I'd never measure up. So I learned to survive alone. And you used that, used my independence, my silence, my desperate need to prove I was worth something, you used all of that to justify stealing from me. The words hung in the air like smoke. Rita spoke up, her voice quiet but firm. Margaret, David, I've watched you parent these children for 15 years now, since I married Vincent. I've bitten my tongue because I'm not their grandmother by blood. But this. She gestured at the table. This is not about money. This is about you making Maria smaller so Jason could seem bigger. My father's jaw clenched. We gave Jason opportunities. With Maria's money, Grandpa Vincent said coldly. Let's not dance around it. You had a daughter who loved you, who worked hard, who sacrificed, and you stole from her. Then you asked her for more. There is no version of this story where you're the victims. The meeting lasted 3 hours. There were tears, my mother's, mostly. There were accusations and justifications and moments where I thought it would all fall apart into screaming. But in the end, it came down to numbers and consequences, the way family betrayals often do when lawyers are in the room. My parents agreed to the following. First, full restitution. $250,000 plus 5 years of compound interest at 4%, totaling $304,160. Plus the $8,000 in loans, plus my legal fees. Grand total, $327,410, paid within 90 days. Second, a formal written apology, acknowledging the misappropriation of funds and the harm caused, to be shared with every family member and friend who'd been told I was extorting them. Third, Jason would refinance his condo and pay back his share to my parents within 2 years, so the burden didn't fall entirely on them, though Diana and I both knew that was their family's problem to solve. The money would come from the sale of their Sacramento house. They'd downsize, lose the home equity they'd built, and face the financial consequences of their choices. "You're forcing us to sell our home," my mother whispered. "No," I said quietly. "You forced yourself to sell it when you stole from me 5 years ago. You just didn't know there'd be consequences yet." We signed the settlement agreement that afternoon. Diana had built-in penalties if they missed any payment deadline, and my grandfather added his own leverage. If they defaulted, he'd cut them out of his estate entirely. As we left the conference room, Jason caught my arm. "Maria, I looked at his hand on my sleeve, then at his face. "You made your choice 5 years ago, Jason. You watched them steal from me, and you benefited from it, and you said nothing. We're not family anymore. We're just people who used to know each other." His face crumpled, but I walked away. If you've ever had to choose your peace over toxic family ties, tell me about it in the comments. Because choosing yourself isn't selfish, it's survival. The first payment, $109,136, 1/3 of the total, arrived in my account 43 days after the settlement was signed. My parents had sold their Sacramento house faster than expected, desperate to close this chapter. I stared at the number on my phone, my bank app showing a balance I'd never seen in my life. It didn't feel like victory. It felt empty. Sad. I'd won, but what had I won? Money that was always mine, returned by people who should have protected me. A family fractured beyond repair. Vindication that came with the knowledge that I'd been valued so little they'd thought they could get away with it. But here's what else that money represented. Every night I'd skipped dinner to save money. Every time I'd said no to friends because I couldn't afford to go out. Every moment I'd felt small and struggling and alone. It was proof that I'd been right to be angry. Right to fight back. Right to demand better. I took a week off work, actual vacation days, the first real break I'd taken in years. I didn't do anything dramatic. I just breathed. Slept in. Went for walks. Let myself feel everything I'd been pushing down for 5 years. Then I started planning. I didn't buy a house right away. That felt too immediate, too reactionary. Instead, I hired a financial advisor, not my father, obviously, but a woman Diana recommended who specialized in helping young professionals build wealth. We created a plan, investment accounts, retirement funds, and yes, eventually, a down payment on a house. But first, I quit my job at the marketing firm. Not out of recklessness, I'd been scouted by a competitor 3 months earlier and turned them down because I couldn't handle change during the lawsuit. Now I called them back. The new position came with a 40% raise, better benefits, and the title I'd been working toward for years. I moved out of the cramped studio into a beautiful one-bedroom apartment with big windows and heating that actually worked. Not extravagant, but mine. Clean. Safe. Comfortable. I started therapy, working through the layers of family dysfunction with a psychologist who specialized in financial abuse and complex family trauma. That's what it was. I learned financial abuse, emotional manipulation, systemic devaluation. Having names for it helped. My grandfather and I grew closer. He felt guilty, I think, for not monitoring the money more carefully, for trusting my parents to do the right thing. But he'd made it right in the end, and that mattered. Rita became an unexpected ally. She started inviting me to lunch when she was in Seattle for business, treating me like the granddaughter she'd never had. Vincent's other grandchildren only call when they want something, she told me once. You're the only one who cared about him for who he is. Jason tried to reach out several times, texts, emails, a handwritten letter. I read them all, but I never responded. Some betrayals don't get fixed with apologies. He'd made his choice, and I'd made mine. My parents sent the formal apology letter as required by the settlement. It was stiff, clearly written by their lawyer, and it arrived with the second payment. I read it once, filed it away, and never looked at it again. They'd done the minimum required, and that told me everything I needed to know. The third and final payment arrived exactly 90 days after the settlement, right on schedule, $109,137. My parents had met every deadline, which meant they avoided the penalties and kept their place in Grandpa Vincent's estate plans. They'd paid what they owed, but they'd never face what they'd done. I used that final payment to make the down payment on a house, not in Portland like Grandpa Vincent had originally intended, but in a suburb outside Seattle, close to my new job. 3 bedrooms, a small yard, big kitchen windows that let in morning light. The day I got the keys, I sat on the floor of the empty living room and cried. Not sad tears, exactly. More like release. Like something that had been wound tight inside me for years finally loosened. This house was mine. Earned through fighting for myself when no one else would. I didn't invite my parents to see it. I didn't send them photos. When they asked, through an awkward email from my mother, I simply replied, I'm settling in well. Thank you for asking. Polite. Distant. Final. Grandpa Vincent came to visit, brought Rita, and the 3 of us christened the house with takeout pizza and champagne. You did good, sweetheart, he said, looking around at the space I'd started to make my own. Not just with the house. With everything. I learned from you, I told him. Fight for what's yours. Don't let people make you small. He smiled, but his eyes were sad. I just wish it hadn't been your own family you had to fight. Me too, I admitted. But at least I know now. I know what I'm worth, not what they told me I was worth, but what I actually am. And that's everything. If you made it this far in the story, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. Because stories like this, about standing up for yourself even when it costs everything, they need to be told. Someone out there needs to hear that it's okay to fight back, even against family. Especially against family. It's been 18 months since that Christmas dinner. 18 months since my world cracked open and revealed the ugliness underneath. People ask me sometimes if I regret it, pushing the lawsuit, taking the money, cutting off my family. Usually they ask it in a whisper, like there's shame in choosing yourself over blood relations. And here's what I tell them, no. I don't regret it. But I grieve it. I grieve the family I thought I had, the parents I wished I'd been given, the childhood where I was valued equally instead of conditionally. I grieve the relationship with Jason that could have been, the sister-in-law bond with Claire that never got to develop. I grieve the version of myself who believed that love was enough to overcome anything. But I don't regret learning the truth. I don't regret fighting for myself. I don't regret discovering that I was stronger than they'd ever let me believe. Here's the thing about family that nobody tells you when you're young: being related doesn't mean they have your best interests at heart. Sometimes the people who should protect you are the ones who hurt you most, because they know you'll keep coming back. Until you don't. My life now is quieter than it was before. Smaller in some ways, fewer family gatherings, shorter holiday card lists. But it's also bigger where it matters. I have friends who choose me every day. I have work I'm proud of. I have a home that's mine, filled with peace instead of tension. I have boundaries, which I never had before. I have a voice that I'm not afraid to use. I have enough money to feel secure, and the knowledge that I fought for every dollar of it. And I have something else, something I didn't expect: I have forgiveness for them. Not the kind where we reconcile and pretend it never happened. But the kind where I've stopped carrying their choices as my burden. They did what they did because of who they are, not because of who I am. Their betrayal was about their values, their insecurity, their need to make one child's success come at the expense of another's dignity. That's their weight to carry, not mine. I set it down, and I walked away. If you're watching this and you see yourself in my story, if you're the forgotten child, the one who's been made small, the one whose sacrifices go unnoticed while others get celebrated, please hear me. You are not obligated to keep giving to people who only take. You are not selfish for wanting what's yours. You are not cruel for setting boundaries with people who hurt you, even if they're family. Especially if they're family. The hardest lesson I learned wasn't about money or legal rights or even betrayal. It was this: loving someone doesn't mean letting them damage you. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do, for yourself and for them, is to step back and let them face the consequences of their choices. Maybe my parents will learn from this. Maybe they'll look at their smaller house and their fractured family and realize that what they did to me was wrong. Maybe they'll change how they treat people, how they value their children, how they define success. Or maybe they won't. Maybe they'll die believing they were the victims in this story, that I was ungrateful and cruel, that they did nothing wrong. Either way, it's not my responsibility to fix them. I can only fix myself. And I have. I'm still fixing myself every day, unlearning the lessons they taught me about being small and grateful and quiet. Learning new lessons about being strong and vocal and worthy. It's not a fast process. Some days I still hear their voices in my head, telling me I'm too much or not enough, that I should be grateful for crumbs, that asking for what I deserve is greedy. But then I look around at this house I bought, this life I built, this peace I fought for, and I remember, they were wrong about me. They were always wrong about me. And I don't owe them anything anymore, not my silence, not my struggle, not my submission. I owe myself everything they refused to give me: respect, protection, value, love. And I'm finally giving it to myself. If this story touched you, if you needed to hear that it's okay to fight for yourself, leave a comment telling me what you're fighting for. Like this video so it reaches someone else who needs it. Subscribe for more stories about choosing yourself even when it's hard. Because you deserve better than what they told you you deserved. And it's never too late to claim it.